Welcome to the Venus Blueprint. On this channel, I seek to bring people who are in a confused state about love, beauty, and romance and bring them into more clarity so that they can manifest the dream life of love, beauty, and romance that they desire. Pleasure is the goal here on the Venus Blueprint, and sometimes we have to look at the things that we are unsatisfied with in order to truly evoke the pleasure that we're looking for. It's like cleaning up your mess. And before you can really enjoy beauty, you've got to have a clean palette. This video, it's inspired by the situation between Monique and her son, Shalon. Now, I have a plethora of TikTok videos that I've spliced up to help this overarching journey in understanding an aspect that has always been difficult to really speak from due to the trending topics before this situation with Monique. What's trendy right now? It's great that women empowerment is so trendy that even in relationships, women are challenged to look at why is it that they attract who they attract, not settling for less, and even basically repelling the type of lingo that we would say are dusties. And I totally embrace this trend because without it, many women would be in relationships that are so toxic for them that they never realize their dream life, their life of feminine softness or empowerment, and they can truly experience what it feels like to embody this pleasure. This is something that some of our ancestors desired in their lives and want to see for us. The reason that I mention ancestors is because going back to the current trend of Monique and her son, I do see this as a generational issue. And there's something that even as someone who wants to be empowered as a woman, that some of us fall into these situations, these loopholes. And we don't have people in our lives that are awful to us, but they just exhibit toxic traits due to these generational traumas. That's why this video is entitled Women or the Women Who Are Married to the Sons of Monique. Now, many of you may empathize with Monique's son, as I do, but let's be real for a moment. In the world of empowerment and trending women to know their worth, is he really your standard? Is he your preference? Probably not. And this is probably because a man who has wounds with his mother will convey and portray those wounds within his relationship, whether indirectly or directly. And let's say he's more advanced than Shalom and he has picked up the pieces with his mother. He still needs to go back and mend the missing pieces of his childhood and fill in the gaps of what was missing in his development. Most of us would want somebody who has mended the issue with their mothers and exhibits levels of confidence and security that we could rest in, right? So unfortunately, this isn't always the reality. And the women who are the wives or who are the girlfriends or the baby mothers of the sons of Monique, they can't separate from these bonds, or they choose not to. Some of them truly can't because they have children, right? If you find that you are a girlfriend, wife, or mother, baby mom of a man who is archetyped as a son of Monique, you might be stuck in between a rock and a hard place. You understand the trend is to leave that man and know your worth. Know that you have options and you don't have to stay with this person. But then you look at this person and you love them. They aren't abusive. It's just that there are toxic traits and habits. Kind of like your relationship with your body when you gain weight. And you know that if you could just change these toxic habits, then you would thrive. Someone who is struggling with their own healing with their mother, more than likely this is transferring into their relationship. So, without further ado, I'm going to be sharing clips and going through this journey with you in dissecting this and digesting this in a way that at the end, the intention is that we truly can have some clarity on what we can do about this. I'd like to introduce you to Guided Inspiration, who's a TikToker that I love on TikTok. And she actually is a body language reader and an energy reader. She actually analyzes the energy of Shalom in his response to Monique. We're going to take some of the information from this and see if we can come up with some clarity as to everything that we want to convey when it comes to finding solutions.
Inform a child that you are not interested in being a mother at a time when that kid is the only kid that has the potential to lead a child to believe that you are not interested in them specifically. But to take it a step further, you also admit, my mother had also admitted to me that she didn't do the best job that she could do.
So she's showing here that he lifts up his right shoulder, and she says that this is an energy read, that he's carrying burdens on his shoulder. Now, to be a wife of a man who carries burdens on his shoulder, I think that a lot of us who want our preference of a strong man may want to see him do this with confidence. But the reality is that if he has experienced similar things as Shalom, he more than likely doesn't do it in confidence. Not only did he miss the nurturing of his mother, but he may also exhibit lack of guidance from a father figure, which then could bring on you having to take on the burden with him. So, if you're the significant other in this situation, you may naturally be the type that takes on the burden of this man. This may even be one of the core attractions of you two, but you have to be aware that you can't do that to yourself. That level of self sacrifice is going to ruin and bring stress amongst your body.
Um, which would also make one begin to question, all of your past decisions and prior emotional interactions. But to be completely honest and fair, those were things that I was willing to get over. Nobody's perfect, we're all human. But my mother showed a clear lack of humility, compassion, and consideration when taking any level of accountability for those things.
I'm not saying that he's a dusty, but I'm saying that it walks and talks like one. So there are many different types of dusties, and I'm using this term because it's a trending term. And this is basically a man who lacks motivation, a man who doesn't really have any direction, probably many women would say isn't a provider. Now, what he said here was very significant. He says that she had no accountability and acknowledgement. Now, we also have to bring in the probably lack of a father figure, right? Who also exhibits no accountability and acknowledgement. And so when we're dealing with this situation, we find somebody who fits into this archetype that many women don't desire because they don't have any provider energy. In this intolerance of what one calls a dusty, I'd like to bring to you one possible situation of a quote unquote dusty archetype, which is a man who's a son of Monique, a man who did not have a father figure or a mother figure nourishing and guiding him. And unfortunately, this is a lot of men in our society due to various reasons that are economic, racial injustices, and everything and in between. In the intolerance uh, of all of this, many women don't choose to understand. And I'm not asking many women to be with these men, but understanding is huge in this experience of what we're going through and watching Monique and her son deal it out on the internet. And in a lot of ways, it's a gift to the generation to have clarity and to see what's going on. And so we need a level of grace and empathy for these men. And if you're a woman who's in a relationship, your level of understanding probably surpasses a lot of people in the world. You already probably have an advanced understanding because you too interacted with his lack of a mother figure and father figure. You probably had situations where you can't connect to the mother either because she clearly isn't nourishing, and you couldn't really connect to the father either because he probably wasn't present. So this is to show you where it comes from. And a lot of people don't ask that question. What creates this archetype of a Dusty? Well, one version is what happens in their childhood.
My mother does a fantastic job of acknowledging a lot of things, but she doesn't take accountability very well, and anything that she may take true accountability for, it's only at her convenience, in my experience.
Acknowledgement is never enough because acknowledgement is only accepting that the harm has happened. Accountability is taking responsibility for causing and creating that harm. When accountability is not taken by the parent, the child must carry the weight of the burden from their past with them. And because the body so accurately keeps the score, the burden centers shoulder the weight of the past, and the habitual activation of that emotion is stored in patterns of muscle tension, which we call emotional armoring. This is generational trauma in full color. Monique's parents failed to remove the burden that she held, and Monique has failed to relieve the burden from her own son. On some subconscious level, the life in comedy that his mother chose over him has embedded in his desire to prove himself worthy in the same arena. It takes a very strong will to rebel and not repeat the mistakes of our parents, but his chosen profession as a stand-up highlights just how hard it is to break cycles.
To My mother does not seem to speak on her own. The only two worlds that I know where daddy is used is for children speaking with their fathers and women acknowledging their pimps.
Oh, but there is a third world, a world where people, men and women, seek to be reparented by their partners. By reassigning the abdicated role of protector, the person being reparented accesses their inner child and attempts to heal old wounds through new relationships.
So this part is significant for the significant other of those who are with men who are part of the archetype of the sons of Monique, right? And we're using this to express an archetype that this reparenting or parentified partner happens unjustly to the person that they're with. And it actually can be an attraction point, which I mentioned before. So you have to be aware of this, and you also have to convey this to your partner in a way that is graceful but intentional. That you're not going to parent them, right? And some of these signs might be like that they kind of whine, cry, or come to you with their problems, right? And a lot of the trendiest people of the world today would be like, I don't have time for that. But you're a different person because you probably would be willing to. And that's because you do have a deep, deep empathy and grace for people who have been hurt. And you also have probably a mothering archetype within yourself that you also exhibit within your relationships. A need to take care of somebody else might be the very reason that you are attracted to this person. You might have actually experienced something about this person that you knew that you could be almost like a rescuer to them. In fact, you could have embodied the rescuer type, the rescuer archetype, married to the, semi dusty archetype. And so these words I'm choosing are intentional. They're not insulting. They're here to help us clarify where we are, because we cannot know where we're going unless we know where we are. And in the space of being somebody who is a significant other to an archetype of the son of Monique, you have to realize what has occurred here is an attraction on both sides. And so, do you deny your mothering abilities? No, absolutely not. In fact, you can have moments of intimacy, touch, care, empathy for your partner, but you have to gauge that on a dynamic of giving that to them maybe 20% of the time and not enabling it for the other 80%. And this doesn't just show up in emotional bonding, while it absolutely can. And that could be where a lot of the dopamine shows up for you, because your rescuer archetype feels needed, and his archetype of not so you having both the probably mother bond and feed off of that dopamine effect, loved. In your emotional engagements, you both can actually share this emotional bond, but it actually is an enablement if you're doing this more than probably 20% of the time, right? And I'm not a doctor or psychologist, so I'm just throwing something out there. And I really think that you may even be the type, if you're in this position, that mother-son dynamic is showing up in various other ways in your relationship. Maybe you're telling him what to do because you think that he needs to know, or you're telling him what to do because he's not doing anything. He had no guidance in his life. There can also be issues in sexual energy that I find with this combination, where it might be hard for him to initiate sex, right? It might be hard for you to really attract this energy that you're looking for, that you are sexually attracted to, and you can find yourself not attracted to him because of that mother-son archetype, because it's not embedded in us to be a mother that's attracted to your son. So when you have been reparentified in your relationship, you can struggle with being attracted to your partner due to this dynamic. The other thing is that he could be like a boy, like a teenage boy sometimes, because he hasn't had that maturity or growing up, and things like that satiate him, and things that satiate him, because he only understands basically the fun like children do, but no structure in life. So like video games and pornography, like these might be things that are major issues for some people who have this dynamic because of that mother-son dynamic. And there are various others. So if any of you have gone this far in the video and you know what I'm talking about, you can comment down below and help expand this. Let's bring clarity to the orientation of where you're at when you're in this dynamic as being a parentified partner.
And then, of course, there's the other side of the equation, the person who wants to be called daddy because they have not been able to successfully fulfill the role of provider in other arenas in their lives. Is this a bad thing? Not necessarily, if you are aware of the role that you are playing and the healing that you are trying to gain through this reassigning of roles. However, the adverse effects tend to be felt by those outside of the role play, meaning your actual parents or your actual children.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. So now she's talking about the parentification of Monique and her husband, Daddy, right? So Monique has claimed Daddy as a nickname to her husband. And this is an example of a flip. So we have been talking about the woman, right, in a heterosexual relationship specifically, taking on the parentified role. But Monique has actually put her husband, right, as the parentified role, and how this actually influences the relationship between Monique and her son. It confuses and displaces him. Within this situation, the man who's called Daddy, right? I believe his name is Sydney. His actual name is Sydney, but he is nicknamed Daddy because he does not take on a provider role. That's what guided inspiration is saying. He role plays a provider role. And she says that this could be harmless unless you do have external people in the family who are needing to know their role. For example, children. So it can create a lot of confusion if Monique is truly treating Daddy like he's her dad. You see, there's a big difference between calling the man Daddy so that all the children know that he's Daddy, right? Especially, well, we'll get to that. So we're calling him Daddy to help children know that's Daddy. Daddy says this. But there's a difference between calling him Daddy for the children and calling him Daddy because it's your nickname for him. So which one is it, is the question that we would have for Mother Monique. Because in calling him Daddy as a fun nickname for him, subconsciously displaces and confuses the children, including her own son. Now, in this clip, Monique choosing Daddy to help her respond to her son says a lot. Monique's response to her son Shalon is pretty brief because within this video, Daddy, or Sydney, I believe his name is, does most of the talking, which concludes that Monique uses Daddy, right, as a protection or a communicator to her son. So Daddy is like her human armor from her son. This is a very confusing position because why would you need to protect yourself from your son? And this type of way that she uses Daddy, for me, implies, now I'd love to be proven wrong, so if you say that I'm wrong, please prove me wrong, but for me it implies that Monique is calling this man Daddy for her own pleasure, not for guidance for the children to know he's Daddy. And they said in the video that they don't want Shalom to call him Daddy. So she wants that nickname to herself, it seems to me. And it's implied by how they act in this video because she uses Daddy as her communication for herself and as her armor for herself, her quote unquote protector. But you don't need to protect yourself from your son. You really don't. Right? Please prove me wrong if I'm off here. I would take pleasure in this conclusion if you could prove me wrong, but unfortunately, from the angle of which it seems to me, Monique is using Daddy to protect herself from her son. This is psychologically toxic for all parties involved, including the audience. It confuses people from really understanding where the true love lies and loyalties lie. But what is clear is that her loyalty is to Daddy. Which leads me to my next moment of this video, which is that you have a man-centered mother. And it's not to say it's right, anything right or wrong, but there are probably pros and cons to a woman who puts the man as her center versus a woman who puts her children. Because I'll tell you that there are cons to putting your children as the center of everything for yourself too, right? But ultimately, the sons of Monique have experienced their mother putting a man who's not their biological father and who doesn't own the son, right, as his son. That's even most important because If it's not his biological father, there that could still create a gap, right, within the son. But for it to be a stepfather, right, a stand-in father who does not claim you as his stepson or his son-in-law or whatever you call it. In fact, he calls him his nephew. So this man that Monique has centered in her life, she there is a dual confusion. She has parentified this man into calling him daddy, so he acts a role of masculine provider, even though he may not actually provide. That part is speculative. I'm not quite sure. But she calls him daddy, right? For her own pleasure, it seems. But this man is actually the step in father figure for her son, but he's not. Therefore, her son does not have a connection to the man that is with his mother. He does not have a parental connection to the man that is with his mother. And this can be tricky because maybe some stepfathers don't want to be a full father figure, right? Especially if the other father is around. But he could be a partial one, but to not want to be one at all confuses the son, no matter if he's an adult or a child, but especially as a child, would confuse him. So now reverting back to the core theme of this, which is that you're the significant other who's observing all of this. You can be an observer, but not an absorber. In order to keep yourself from self-sacrificing. The significant others of who are married or wives or baby mothers to the sons of Monique, men who have been neglected, who don't have a way, you're going to find that this man has a lot of confusion. And one of the things that you have to do is protect yourself from absorbing that confusion. And it's also not your job to bring him clarity, but understanding, which is probably something you already have. But if you need more of it, I hope that this video has brought you more understanding of the position that you're in. Some of the things that can bring you into more clarity if you find yourself in this position and you're ready to guide yourself out of the jungle and into more clarity is to create clarity within your relationship, to define roles with grace, empathy, love, care, pleasure, and joy, even in fun game plays, even in fun, sexy role plays. But create a definitive list of what you need, of what your preferences would be. And don't throw your preferences at him like expectations, but create roles in your imagination and in your list and in however you cultivate this list and how you apply this list to your life. Create clear roles, even if this is sitting him down, and you don't have to do the whole spiel of where you got this from. I'm telling you, because this is an astrology channel. As an astrologer who lives her life with her family, like, I can't sit and break down astrology to people in my family who don't care about it. But I can still deliver the spiritual message without the lingo. And that's what you're here to do. You're here to understand it so that you know where you are at. But then you convey this energy, this message, into the simplest boundaries, formulas, and roles that are going to serve you. And don't try to change everything at once, but you can collaborate in synergy in win win situations that cultivate you and your partner to thrive out of this shit. The other thing is to remove yourself from the situation. Now, this is not leave the partnership, but if you got to do that, you could do that too. You always could have done that. But this video is for those who choose to stay. And I'm choosing the words choose for a reason because you don't have to stay. But if you choose to stay, then your next step is to change what you do, because ultimately you're collaborating with your partner and you're creating synergy, but you truly can't change another person, but you could change what you're doing. And some of those things are, one, that 20% that I talked about earlier in this video, being that mothering, empathetic energy 20% of the time, maybe 15% of the time, but not the whole time. And what are you doing in that whole time? You're cultivating the gaps that you are missing, because there's a reason you were here too. You may have a rescuer archetype. You have things that brought you here that you need to heal. You have to find the things that bring you passion and have a life outside of your relationship. You need to start seeing your relationship as an adornment to the life that you already create. And this will actually adjust you more, because more than likely you have become somewhat like Monique, centering this man in your life. And that might be because of your own father issues. Women who tend to flock to men who are tender, emotionally needy, may have had fathers who were either absent or present but not present. Like he was there but not there. Some of you may have had fathers who were harsh, cold, and maybe even downright abusive, verbally, physically. And you wanted a man who would show you an emotional, tender side, and you got that, but you got the whole baggage that comes with that. And the reason you got the whole baggage is probably because you have your own baggage. So ultimately, if you're a significant other, a girlfriend, a wife, a baby mother to a man who is a son of Monique archetype, then this video was about you having understanding so that you truly can start your own process of filling in your own gaps where this man has filled it in for you. He still can, but also to a certain percentage of your choosing. But to have him fill up all those gaps will keep the cycle of toxicity. To have a man be the center of your life means that he fills in some of the most important gaps that you actually need to fill for yourself. So you have to identify what you're getting from this. That's some real stuff. That's some real big woman panty stuff. Because a lot of women are just going to walk away. But for the ones who have the choice and know they're choosing to stay, you get to actually face your demons head on and figure out what you have been lacking to put you in this position. And what you need to do for yourself probably comes with a ton of empathy, grace, having no guilt and no shame about your past, and moving forward unapologetically in putting your needs as the center of your life. So having these defined roles within you and your partnership, because there's so much confusion everywhere else, define these roles in a win-win collaborative effort. Then also recognize the other the other toxic habits that you have been participating in that keeps the dynamic of you two going. So if you remove your part of the dynamic and recreate a new dynamic, then something has to change. And you have successfully done this without trying to change your partner, which actually is the easiest way to get what you want. Thank you so much. I put my heart and soul into this video. And if you like this video, give me a like, comment below what more you might want to see from me. I'm thinking of doing some affirmations, but I'd love to continue this as a step-by-step process in helping us all guide ourselves toward clarity, thriving on our relationships, getting what we want out of our relationships. Have a good night.